We will now delve into our phone-in segment. We'll bring a critical issue that affects us all, which is Nigeria's national security. So now, with the ongoing challenges across the country, we're asking, are our service chiefs performing well? That is a question we need an answer to. So from banditry and kidnapping to insurgency and communal clashes, Nigeria has faced complex security threats. Our service chiefs have a daunting task in addressing these issues. But are they up to the challenge? That is a very, very huge question. Join the conversation by calling in or sending a WhatsApp message. Let's discuss the performance of our service chiefs and explore ways to improve national security. What do you think are the strengths and weaknesses of their strategies? Are they capable of tackling these issues? Are they short-handed? What are the issues and how can they tackle them? Share your thoughts with us on the phone number that is displayed on your screen. Call us. Let's hear your thoughts. Send messages so that we can read them up here for us to have more insight on your thoughts.
Yeah. I mean, given what has been happening, I don't want to generalize, but I think the public perception around insecurity has been that the outcome is not as desirable as Nigerians wanted. And I do think that they do need a lot of time, because the experts have spoken about how this insecurity that we're dealing with at the multi-dimensional level would be something that would perhaps take us the next decade or more to address, because there are some structural issues that continue to fuel these insecurities that we're dealing with, whether it's banditry, whether it's communal clashes or attacks on communities that continue unabated. And all of these things, the Boko Haram insurgency, for instance, because there are some internal factors, domestic, that we can control, but there are some of those variables that are outside the control of the Nigerian government. Some things that are happening across the region. Look at what's happening in Burkina Faso, for instance, the JNIM attacks. Just over the weekend, they also attacked yet another military base, overran it and took it over. So you look at what's happening in Libya, you look at the insecurity or the unrest in Sudan, for instance. There are multiple variables at play here that still fuels into the Nigerian insecurity question. But however, on the domestic front, yes, many Nigerians rightfully feel that the performance is below average. That is not to say that we've not recorded huge gains in different parts. I mean, in Kogi, just this past week, an operation cost 2 soldiers their lives. On the battlefront, we've been seeing some disturbing images. Nigerian soldiers, brave fallen heroes, paying the ultimate price to allow us to sleep at night. But the question is the strategy right? Are Nigerians feeling safe? And if that is not the case, then what does that say about the performance indicators of the people who have been saddled with the leadership of the war against terrorism, the war against insecurity, crime and criminality? So let's have a conversation about this one. I believe that the time is ripe for Nigerians to begin to weigh in and say, listen, they could do better in this way, in this area or in that area. The kinetic approach, the non-kinetic approach, all of that has to be factored in, because when you talk about security, it's pretty much the linchpin. Without security, nothing else can be recorded in the positive light, right? We can never talk about full economic growth without security.
Exactly, and the insecure state is a volatile state at the end of the day. And to be honest, some of the things that might come into Nigerians' mind, or the questions that might come into Nigerians' minds, are especially with the domestic, clashes and kidnap, the banditry that goes on, which might be in the purview of the security agencies. First off, the tactics that are put in place in tackling these issues, in the right direction? Secondly, are they well equipped to tackle those issues? But before we delve deep into more, let's take our first caller of the day. Hello, good morning.
Morning, Hauwa, Adamu, Kiyawa. How are you this morning?
I'm doing fine, thank you. Good morning.
Thank you. I also want to extend my regards to Abdullahi Ahmed.
Good morning, Abba
I
Second.
watch his program. I can tell you, I love how you put your questions, traveling all the things that are before you. Thank you, Trustee, for the wonderful job you do.
Good morning, Abba Second. Happy Easter. Happy Easter to you.
Thank you very much.
Right.
Straight to the point. The panacea to youth unemployment and lackadaisical attitude to our security architecture all is centered to one basic thing. We lack wisdom to do this thing. And that is why I keep on saying on this program, if the children are not educated, Nigeria is heading to a great war. A great war. Why do I say a great war? Because children soldiers, you find them in Boko Haram. Kidnappers, you find them. All these abnormalities that need to be checked are not being checked. Our security agents are not doing the right thing. Just like I said last time, we used to have the E-Department. What was the E-Department? The E-Department was a subsidiary section in the Nigerian police. And this section was to see to the undercover work of the police. Wherever the police are seen, there are undercover men that filter information and bring it. Which has to do with kinetic and non-kinetic. But what eventually happened? The president came, removed them from the police, the E-Department, and they made it NSA. After it became NSA, another government came, make it SSS. Now we have DSS, we have SSS. This section of our undercover intelligence, they are not performing their duties. I am boldly saying this because I know what it takes for Israel to do to perform their function optimally. And that is why in the whole world, Israel has the best undercover security agent. Followed by Russia. Russia also has one of the best networks. And after that what do they call this man this man that was talking last time? He also has Syria. He also has the best undercover intelligence. We must have undercover intelligence. Like now, tell a DSS man or an SSS man to go to village. He will not go, or to go to a village where there is no light. And that is why we are having our problem. My brother, if I'm given the opportunity to explain and to give proper solution to how these things will end, it will go a long way. We will go a long way achieving it. But because we are only proactive in one aspect, that is why we are having problem. Information and not the undercover information is dead. We see people carrying gun and showing. That is not the war. That is not the adequate warfare that we need to go into. Undercover, not the police that are not to be seen. That is the essence of security. Not the ones that are seen. Because crime will not be committed when they see the police. The crimes will be committed when the police are not trained, and that is why the undercover men are required.
Looks like we've lost our connection to Abba Second there. But I think good point there, talking about intelligence services and how we cannot continue with this reactive approach or strategy. I mean, there has to be an attack before we repair, or in some cases, you know, we get wind of the information, and then our forces swing into counter terrorism or counter-offensive operations. I mean, that's not to downplay the significance of the job that they're doing, but I think Abasekon's point is to say that we can prevent some of these incidents from becoming full-blown insurgencies or insecurity that we're dealing with across, you know, every region of this country, right? We talk about how the Nigerian military has been overstretched significantly, Hauwa, to a point where in every state there is one theater or the other where the Nigerian military is, you know, deploying its personnel to address one security challenge or the other. But yes, I think his point about intelligence is quite important. And you go to some of these communities and we call them ungoverned spaces for good reason, because you get a sense that there is minimal, if not zero, representation whatsoever. We had a whole governor tell the world that, you know, in terms of equipping the police, for instance, Governor Reddy, I think last year, made the point that, you know, you have a whole local government where the service weapons are not up to 20. How do you explain that?
Well, with the point that Abasenkon made, to be honest, it would actually reduce footwork, manpower if we utilize, you know, reconnaissance, utilize intel, you know, gathering, as well as infiltration.
Yeah.
Let's take the next caller.
Hello, good morning. Hello, good morning. Hello, good morning. All right, the connection is rather poor this morning. Apologies for that. Just keep trying. If one number doesn't work out, try giving us a call on the other number. If it doesn't work out, maybe try sending us a message via WhatsApp. We will get in touch with some of those messages. But we'd love to get your point on this one. I think we're having this conversation against the backdrop of what was the norm. Remember when Nigerians were, you know, complaining, talking about the persistent attacks or the relentless attacks on communities under the Buhari administration, and he kept his faith with the service chiefs for the longest time.
Yes.
And Nigerians wondered, like, where are the KPIs? What are the deliverables, for instance? We've seen so many deadlines being given and none has been met. I remember the president from inauguration gave a deadline, and then a year down the line also gave another deadline, several deadlines, and they stayed on. And I believe we had one of the longest chief of army staff under the Buhari administration. I think so. And it just made Nigerians feel, okay, it's as if there are no KPIs here that, you know, they have to stick to. There are no deliverables, and that's why the situation continued to inundate the polity, where you get a sense that, you know, it doesn't really matter how poor their performance is, they're still going to keep their jobs. Let's speak to our next caller then. Hello, good morning.
Good morning. Your voice is very low. Can you increase your volume, please? This is Adamu calling from London.
Adi, good morning. We can hear you. We can hear you clearly, Adi. Good morning. Happy Easter.
I must hear you too.
Yeah.
Good morning to my sister there.
Good morning.
My point is totally ambiguous. My view is totally different. I take it one by one. Number one, regarding the notice, which is the Boko Haram something, we require a lot of intelligence there, no doubt about that. But the soldiers that are kept there, are they feeding them properly? Are they getting enough money to feed themselves? When the soldier is put somewhere to fight Boko Haram, he has spent 2 years without seeing his family. I mean, what happened to his liking? So, what they should have done is that put the soldier there, after 6 months, replace them, let them go to their family, feed their children, see everything, come back after 6 months. Replace it and give them good money for feeding, so they can feed themselves, so that they can be able to perform. That's number one. Number two, let's come to the North Central there. The killing in the Benue, the where they slaughter people. We don't need any intelligence here. We already have the intelligence. 2 weeks ago, the whole saw it. That's why we gave press conference in Adamu. We said for peace to reign, they must remove social person from death, the social army, social people, they must remove them for peace to reign. Televised everywhere free all over the world. And they left them. No arrest nothing. Who are they joking with? They are not serious. Nigeria is not serious at all. People give conference about peace to reign. After that conference, because the people was slaughtered again in just. And they know them, they see them. Who are they deceiving? We are appealing to American president, we in the diaspora. Because only the American president can threaten government, Nigeria, that they will sit tight. They should sue their visa. All of them should not be allowed to travel to America or United Kingdom. Then they will sit tight. Because some people, which intelligent are you looking for? Most of people give press conference. There is no peace. Do this, do that. And they do that after another 50 slaughter. Which evidence are you looking for again? So, my point is this, the president is here in London. So, he should go back to Nigeria and sort it out. Either he will go the service ship and put new ones there and sit tight in Nigeria. He's not supposed to be here. Go back to Nigeria and do the work they elected him to do. And you can't do it to resign. Because look at the way they are selecting people. And they know these people, one that know, place to government, place to the world that some people are among those who arrested, people in Nigeria, powerful people who are showing that they should release them. Who are the powerful people? If they don't handle this thing properly, I fear for my country. But my pride for Nigeria, for God to take control of Nigeria. We are just deceiving ourselves, we are just joking. I'm telling you, we are joking. Look at the way they slaughter everywhere, they keep me anyhow. This will avoid, we need have impact on investment in Nigeria. How will I agree that, okay, let's gather money together, maybe it's £500 million, let's go and invest in Nigeria. When I know they can slaughter anybody there tomorrow. So it's affecting everybody. We are not happy about this. So they are not serious, they are just playing pranks with large of people. But when we come one day and see Nigeria and take control of Nigeria, just do this thing, what we deal with them. That's my prayer. God bless Nigeria.
Amen to that, Adamu. It's always a pleasure to hear from you. Always passionate about, some of his takes. But yes, investments like security, and there's a nexus between how bad the economy is doing and why crime and criminality is on the rise. But just to double down on this one, okay, I think before we double down on at this point, I think another caller has just in the conversation. Hello, good morning. Hello, good morning.
Hello?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to Daybreak Interactive. Who is on the line?
Am I speaking with
Yes.
Trust TV?
Yes, you're on to Daybreak on Trust TV. Who is on the line and where are you calling from?
Thank you very much. I want to say Happy Easter to all of you.
Happy Easter.
On your point of discussion today, national security, are the service chiefs performing well?
Yes, go ahead.
I wish to tell you that they are performing below expectation, and my reasons are this. One, heavy budget of money is expended daily, and it is assumed that monkey dey walk, baboon dey chop. Those are the few working are not giving anything. The top officers at the top use this money at their own discretion, because this our soldiers, our personnel are best, are one of the best in the whole world. They perform in Liberia, Sierra Leone, Burundi, and so on. Why not in Nigeria? We have been achieving peace in the last, before the civilian administration. Where has this peace gone, and what is the problem?
it is because it is not handled the way it is expected. Now, because of the benefits these personnel, senior personnel in the service and the security service are enjoying, they don't want this banditry and others to end because of their selfish gain. If not, this is supposed to have finished since. Now, for example, the bandits used to call to give their ransom, and it is said that all our numbers be registered. Wherever you are calling, they will understand. They will know where you are. Why is these people negotiating, and up till today they don't know where they are? They cannot arrest them. So it is assumed people somewhere are making gain of this money, and they want this war or banditry or whatever type of security challenges to continue. That is why they don't want it to end. And if I were the president, I would give them condition. And this condition, all the service chiefs, to make sure this thing end within 3 months, or all of them will be fired. If other people come and they continue, they will be fired. And as long as this thing continues, if they are firing them, in fact, peace will come back to Nigeria. And let me tell you, some people are, even the big people in government are benefiting. That is why they don't want this war to end. And so, if they are exposing them, this thing will finish. As long as they keep secret on them, it will not, this banditry will not stop. Now, these people are getting weapons. Where are these weapons coming from? Won't our intelligence officers dictate how they get this money to bring weapons to Nigeria? So it is assumed there is a cover-up in what they are doing. And as long as this cover-up is not open, as long as I'm telling you, this thing will continue. And we, the masses, will continue to suffer, while them at the top will continue to enjoy. So please, let us not deceive ourselves.
Right, okay.
The people at the government, the security chief will know where this thing are. And so as long as the government will not come to tend to protect the masses, this thing will continue.
Okay. We couldn't get the name of the caller there, but thank you so much for calling in. I do appreciate the take. I think 2 things that we pointed out. It is a timeline.
Yes.
Right? The president says in 6 months, I want stability in northwest Nigeria.
Exactly.
Whatever it takes. And you don't deliver. Guess what? You're gone. And then the next set of people come. And they understand the seriousness and the severity of the task at hand. And I'm not trying to downplay the efforts of the current service chiefs or the men of the Nigerian Armed Forces and the police and everybody else involved. But if the problem is still there, we don't have anything to celebrate. Right? I mean, I understand that sometimes progress is a slow process, but when you're dealing with lives and livelihoods of people, we don't have the luxury of time. Nigerians cannot afford to wait another 20 years for peace to return. So we have to, it's all hands on deck, and we don't, Nigerians are simply saying we don't have this feeling that all hands are on deck, and that's why things continue to happen this way.
Definitely. We have another caller on the line.
Good morning.
Hello, good morning, Shetima.
Good morning, Hauwa. Good morning, Abdullahi.
Good morning, Shetima. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, this is Shetima calling from Adamu.
As always, a pleasure.
You see, Abdullahi, the key of the matter, I heard about your contribution. We have been making very good efforts, and I also listened about Adamu in London, and they have tried a lot. But the key of the matter is the problem that we are having. Like my brother, one of my brothers said, we have a very strong military, which is true. Very strong military. They have shown themselves in foreign operations, and they have been very, very well. And that time, if you can remember, it was a military era. But now we are in democratic era. And the major problem that we are having now in the basis of operation. The way that our military are operating, and there is interference of foreign power. the issue of the security. That's why the problem lies. Because I was in a degree throughout this Boko Haram, and up to date, I have never gone anywhere. I was in a degree, and I see all what is happening. The thing of the matter is, if you look at it, the way Boko Haram, they have care on our civilian vessels, they don't have care on our soldiers. I believe it is simple. Because there is so many foreign instructions and foreign rules that tie them up. If they cannot perform the way they want to perform. And this issue of this amnesty, it has been arresting the situation. Let us take the truth to ourselves. Because there is no use you can pardon a killer. Somebody who is taking people's life and you pardon him. And sometimes if you just mind, you will have a calm in the they say the same go to harm. When the same go to harm, they are drinking bottled water. They are drinking a lot of diet. They are giving them food that you and ordinary people you cannot get. What are they telling you want? Crime case. They can get it. You are giving them emphasis, money, a lot of money. What are you doing? Are you encouraging them to continue? Or what was that? You did not share it. And also, if you look at it very well, where our nations are operating, they are operating not voting law, offensive law, not offensive law. The only one who can defeat an enemy very fast, you just assume to offensive law. You can pursue him anywhere he is. In whatever condition you find him, you just fire him. But you can just delay a border and stay until when the interfaces come. Until when they attack you, you just attack them back. This is a bad idea. It's somebody I was opportune and please know of the Chadian soldier. When they are pursuing Boko Haram, if they are thinking time, they go after them. When they are thinking they go after them, they never give them
Right. Is Shatima still there? Okay, I think we lost a connection there. 3 or 4 points to point out from Ade's conversation that led into the next caller and what Shatima is also talking about, how Boko Haram fighters fear the civilian duty of more than they are afraid of the conventional army that we have. And Ade talked about the motivation, the welfare and well-being of the people in the battlefront, right? And it all boils down to leadership. It all boils down to leadership. I know a conversation we had some time ago with the Chief of Defense Staff talking about remuneration and welfare, saying that, listen, as at the time of that conversation, which was last year, the daily feeding quota or ration in terms of naira is still at 1,500, I think.
Per meal?
For a meal, per day, I think. Is it per meal or per day? I stand to be corrected, but it was as low as that. And we've seen several videos online of soldiers complaining and groaning. If they're losing their incentive to fight as patriots, because they're risking their lives, and they cannot afford to eat healthy food, right? Psychologically, I mean, they are already losing the war.
Definitely.
Right?
Definitely.
And to Shatima's point, as a football fan myself, I like to say that the best form of defense is to attack.
Yes.
Right? Not to wait for them to, and then you counter. I mean, you can always counter, right? But the best form is for us to see the Nigerian military, the Nigerian security forces on the offensive.
And I believe that goes hand in hand with gathering intel, infiltration as well.
Exactly. I mean, the essence of this conversation is not to tell the service chiefs or those on the battlefront how to do their jobs. We're simply saying that it is not working. If our target is to ensure law and order and safety of lives and property, Nigerians are not getting that feeling right now. Not in Northeast, not in North Central, and definitely not in the Northwest. Let's take a look at the WhatsApp messages we have so far.
All right, for the first person, that is Paul Kegninger. Apologies if I pronounced the name correct.
You definitely got the name wrong.
Apologies. Good morning, Trust TV. The service chiefs are doing a great job. This is room for improvement. There is room for improvement. Get the local communities interested in security around them. The civilian JTF model be replicated nationwide. Service chiefs to encourage Baba to recruit new hands, to inject new energy into the services. Paul Kagan.
You not just say Paul from
All right, Paul.
Right.
Paul,
thank you so much for joining the conversation. I appreciate that thought. So, yes, divergent views. People could say the glass is half full, the glass is half empty, and we could both be right. And like we did say, this is not to say that there have been no improvements whatsoever or no positives have been recorded. The question is, how much room for improvement is there? And if you look at the casualty levels over the past couple of weeks, it just shows you that this problem is still pretty much there if you have to consider everything else.
And there's more to be done.
Exactly. Let's go back to our WhatsApp page now for the next message. Mr. F. Umar says, one of the callers spoke disparaging the DSS operations. I'm sure he must be a retired police officer. He was speaking out of envy and jealousy, and because he did not know how the service operates. The DSS is doing their best and will continue to do that despite the unwarranted negative criticism from ignorant people. I suppose Mr. F is sympathetic to the DSS, or perhaps a DSS operative himself. Of course, we know they watch this program, but listen, to each his own, right? That is his own opinion, and Mr. F, that is your own opinion. But I think he wasn't trying to be disparaging, if I understand it. But second's point is that the deliverables have changed, and we have this proliferation of intelligence agencies in the military, in the police, across several sectors. Also, we have the NIA, we have the DSS. I mean, there are so many layers of them. But the intelligence does not seem to be applied in our approach towards addressing the one singular problem that we're dealing with, which is insecurity at all levels. And I think there is room for varying opinions to be applied here. Do we have more from WhatsApp? I believe we're running out of time. Okay, one more, Hauwa.
All right, the next one. Good morning, honorable journalists in the studio. Thank you very much. This is Michelle Amos from Birning Shehu, Sokoto State. On the topic of the day, are the service chiefs performing well? He says the answer is emphatically no. They failed us all, and sadly the president is allowing them to continue heading their various offices. It's just like in the days of former President Buhari, the service chiefs were performing below the radar, but PMB allowed them to negatively flourish in their offices, even with so many allegations against them of siphoning and diverting money for their personal use, allegedly. And they were even rewarded with ambassadorship after leaving office. So what does that tell you about our leaders in our community and our country? The thing is, there's no accountability, no sincerity, no moral, and the moral is low. We seriously need investigation in the defense sector, and serious penalty should be dished out to whoever is found culpable. God bless Nigeria.
Yeah, amen to that. We cannot continue to accept mediocre outcome or performances. Listen, if myself or Hauwa are doing badly on this show, not able to anchor the program well, guess what Media Trust is going to do? Replace us. Find better anchors for this program, right? If your mechanic is not able to fix the problem, you're not going to keep going back to him.
We'll find
You're going to look for a better mechanic, right? So why do we keep, burying our heads in there as if it's no one's problem if the problem is not solved? I mean, government is about management and about solving problems, right?
Definitely.
Problems that are there, by the way, problems that our politicians campaigned on. So if they're not able to solve the problem, I think the people have at least the right to air their views about this one, while also saying kudos to the little gains that we have recorded so far. Back to WhatsApp. The next message says, Mr. Shoyinbo Tulani, as always, good to hear from you from Abeokuta in Ogun State, says, Happy Easter. Concerning the topic of the day, I think we should first and foremost appreciate the great sacrifice our troops are offering to this great nation. It is also vital to note that we are not fighting a conventional warfare. We are fighting an invisible enemies. For the first time in a long time, I think I'm going to disagree with Shoyinbo there. They're not invisible. But moving on, he says, Nigeria is a very vast country and the enemies are taking advantage of our large expanse of land, knowing where the military are stationed, making it possible for them to move from one location to another. The terrorism we're facing has international collaborations. We need to get to the root of this international financiers. Fighting terrorism is not a child play. Many nations are facing the same and are still fighting them and yet unable to eradicate them completely. Their service chiefs are doing their best based, or say according to their capacities. We must encourage our troops and not to castigate them. And that's why we're not talking about troops. We're talking about the leadership of said troops. But then, Mr. Shoyinbo, appreciate you for airing your views on this one. Yes, and this conversation should not be misconstrued as an attack on our armed forces. I mean, we of all people do appreciate how much they're doing to keep us safe.
Absolutely.
But there's room for improvement. And like the Oliver Twist that now we all are, we can only ask for more. Thank you most kindly for joining the conversation. We do appreciate your contributions on this one via WhatsApp and call. For those who tried unsuccessfully, you can try again next time.